So now we're up to the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Hey Yomid Beis. The Mishnah goes into more details about what's mutter and what's also in the case of mutter anah. Vitorem es chumaso masrosov lidaito. If Reuven is Madir Shimon, he can nevertheless be mafresh truma or maser on behalf of Shimon, on behalf of the mudar. Again, he can't do it with his own payros. He's got to do it with the payros of the mudar, and that's called l'daito. So let's say, for example, the mudar did not appoint the madir as a shliach to be mafresh truma or maser on his behalf. If that be the case, then the madir functioning as a shliach of the mudar would certainly be considered giving hana to the mudar. The mudar would not be allowed to receive that hana, but rather the case is, says the Ran, and this is based on a sugya later on Daf Lamed Vav, that the mudar made a declaration called a rotza litrom yavel v'yitrom. Anyone who wants to be mafresh my truma could go ahead and do so. So that's called a gili das, that he wants somebody to be mafresh truma. Anyone could come along and be mafresh his truma, but he's not functioning as the shliach of the balabais of the mudar. Umakriv olav kine zovim v'kine zovos kine yoldos chatos vashomos. Now, if the madir is a kohen and he's serving in the Beis Hamikdash, he's allowed to be makriv karbanos on behalf of the mudar. And just like in the previous case, where the madir is being mafresh truma ma'aser l'shem mitzvah, here too the kohen is being makriv these karbanos l'shem mitzvah, and he's not doing it l'shem hana. He's not doing it for the purpose of giving a benefit to the mudar. That would be awesome, but rather he's doing it as a mitzvah. Now the Mishnah specifies here what's called mechusrei kapara. There are 4 mechusrei kapara, zav, zavi, yoledis, and mitzorah. And in these cases, they have to bring kinei zavim or kinei zavos. These are pairs of birds that during the process of purification they have to bring, whether it's a zav or a zava. Then you have a yoledes. Now that can only be a female, a mother, and she has to bring her kapara, which is also zug. When she's ready for tara, she brings a kevet. Oh, okay, it's more complicated than that. It's not tutsi pora, but it's either a kevesli ola, vitur or benyon lechatetz. So she brings 2 karbanos, an ola and a chatetz. The ola is a zevach behema, and the chatos is a bird. Okay. And the Gemara is going to explain why the Mishnah mentions those cases of mechusar kapara. Now we have chatos and hashamos. So this has to do with the mitzorah, who's also mechusar kapara. And during his process of tara, he has to bring a chatos and an osham. So the bottom line is that it's not considered a violation of the Isur Neder, the Isur Hana, if the Kohen is going to serve in the Migdash and do these avodos and bring these karbonos on behalf of the mudar. And basically, even though the mudar gets a certain amount of hana from the madir in this case, but nevertheless, we have a principle called mitzvos lav lehenos nitn. He says in the footnote here, "Ein lesser machmas masher makruv avuras hakarbon ki amadir ose bazeh mitzvah v'lo l'shem hana hanos hamudar ose." Now, once again, we come back to square one. And that is the madir, the kohen, a shliach of the mudar? That would certainly be awesome. In the case of Truma, we said that the mudar made a declaration called rotza litrom yom v'yitrom. In this case, it's almost as if the Kohen is stepping up to the plate. He's not operating as an appointed agent of the Mudar, but rather he's a shliach derachmona. Weiter. Umelamdo medrash halachos v'agodos. And the Madi is allowed to teach the following sections of Torah to the Mudar. Medrash halachos v'agodos. So it means, again, the Madir is giving something to the Mudar, but as a mitzvah, and therefore we don't define this as Hana, because mitzvah lenos nitnu. And you might ask, but let's say the Madir is teaching and not getting paid for it. Where's his salary? He's apparently waiving his salary. That itself is Hana. So the answer is that with regard to Medrash Halachos and Agados, the Torah does not permit you to take schar. You have to teach a bechina. This is derived from Moshe Rabbeinu. Ma'ani bechina afatem bechina. Avolo yilamderu mikra. But mikra you're allowed to be paid for. And therefore, if you're allowed to take money for it, then if the Madir, as the Malamed of Mikra, decides to waive his rights to compensation, then he's giving a Hana to the Mudar. Now, I'm not sure why the Mishnah here doesn't say what we saw in the previous Mishnah, that he should take the money and give it to Hegdish. Aval Malamed, who is Bonaves Benosa Mikra. So again, if he's teaching the Mudar himself, that's awesome, because then he's giving Hana by waiving his compensation. But he's allowed to teach the children of the Mudar, Mikra. Why? Because then it's considered as if the Mudar is not getting Hana. Now, wait a second. What do you mean the Mudar is not getting Hana? The Torah says, V'shinantu l'vanecha, he's obligated to teach Torah to his children. And now the Madir is doing that on his behalf. But again, we're going to have to say that that's comes under the klal of mitzvah lahedos, right? He gets Hana on the fact that he, the Mudar, doesn't have to do this mitzvah and teach his children because someone else is taking care of it. But nevertheless, that Hana is not considered Hana al pi din because it's mitzvah lahedos. The only question we have to ask here on this Mishnah is about the tircha. So the Tiferes Yisrael on the Mishnayos asks the following question. Wait a minute. Teaching children Mikra requires a great deal of tircha, of physical exertion. And now the Madir is saving the Mudar all that physical tircha. Why isn't that considered a violation of the Yisra Hana of the Neder? Says the Tiferes Yisrael, and this again requires a lot of iyun. He says that saving someone tircha is only grama. It's like, Mavriach Hari, it's indirect. So the Gemara asks, Iboiluhu Hani Kani Shluchadi Danavu O Shluchad Dishmaya. Are the Kohanim who bring karbonis to the Mikdash considered the agents on behalf of the Bala Karbon? Or no, they are appointed agents Min HaShamayim. They're doing the Shlichus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu by doing the Avodah of the Mikdash. L'may nafkemina lemudar hana. If the Kohen is the shliach of the Bala Karbon Hamahanile, now he's giving Hana to the Mudar by fulfilling his shlichus and being makriv the Karbon on his behalf. He also, and then it's a violation of the Neder. But v'iyam shluchah d'shmaya, if he's only operating as a shliach of Shomayim, then shari it's mutter to the Kohen to be makriv because he's not doing a shlichus on behalf of the Mudar. He's only doing a shlichus on behalf of Shomayim. And the Gemara asks, "My Toshma, this nan." Let's learn our Mishnah. Makrivol of Kinei Zovim, etc., etc. Yamrit Shluchi Didan. If you're going to say that the Kohen is our shliach, the shliach of Bala Karbon Kamahani Le, he's giving a note to the Mudar. How could the Mishnah allow this and say Makrivol? We should have prohibited it. We have to assume, therefore, that Kohanim are considered Shluchei D'Shmaya and not Shluchei Didan. And now we can understand why he's allowed to be Makriv, because the Karban is doing this Lashamayim, and only Agavurcha, there's a grama that the Mudar Hana gets a Hana from this. For example, as a result of the Mechusar Kapar bringing the Kapar, he's allowed to enter into the Mikdash, he's allowed to eat Kodshim. So that's called Grama or Gram Hana, like we saw earlier in the first Yisrael. The Gemara asks, Uletamech, if you want to derive from this Mishnah that Kohanim Ashluchi D'Shmaya is listening Makriv Olav Karbonos, why didn't you just say in the Mishnah that the Kohen is allowed to bring Karbonos? Why is the Mishnah totally exclusively focused on Mechusrei Kapar? So here the Ran asks, what do you mean Mechusrei Kapar? It mentions Chatos V'Yosham, and that gives the impression that it's Lav Dafka Mechusrei Kapara. So he says the following, that it must be referring to a mitzora. And how do I know that Chatas V'Yoshim is referring to a mitzora? Because it was quoted in the Mishnah in one breath with Kinei Zavim and Kinei Zavos and Yoldos, which are all Mechusrei Kapara. And there are four Mechusrei Kaparas, we said before, Zav, Zava, Yoledes, and Mitzora. And that means even if they did everything necessary for their Torah, but they didn't bring the Karbonos, the Kapara, they remain in the state of Tumah. With no question. So why does the Mishnah focus on these Mechusrei Kapara case? Just tell me a general statement that the Madir is permitted to serve as a Kohen and bring any Karban on behalf of the Muda. Ela Mechusrei Kapara shiny. Therefore, we have no choice but to assume that the heter here for the Madir Kohen to serve as the Kohen Ovid on behalf of the Mudar is only limited to Mechusrei Kapara. It's what we call a Bezunder din. It's a special din in Mechusrei Kapara. That even though in other Karbonos, it would be also for the Madir to serve as the Kohen to be Makriv on behalf of the Mudar, because Kohen Mashluchi Didan. But these Karbonos are different. And why? The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Hakol Tzrichim Das, Kutzim Mechusrei Kapara. Every carbon, with the exception of Mechusrei Kapara, is considered a Kapara. And if it's Kapara, then you need what's called Das Bailim. The Bailim want to achieve Kapara, and they decide with full will to bring the carbon. But Mechusrei Kapara is different. This is not a carbon shel Kapara. This is a carbon shel Tahara. And the purpose and the goal of this carbon is to be matir the Bailim to Kodshim to the Mikdash because of a complete purification, a complete Tahara. So therefore, since these karbonos are not machaprim olav, then you could bring these karbonos even without the das bailim, and therefore, for sure, in these cases, the Kohen is not serving as a shliach of the bailim. It's even shalom das bailim. So Rabbi Yochanan now brings a proof to support his claim that Mechusrei Kapara did not require das bailim. Sharei Adam maybe korban albonim velbenosim aktanim. Shenemar, it says in the parasha of Zav, Zos Toros Hazav. And the word Toros is coming as a ribui, ben gadol, ben katan. Now, a katan is not about das. He doesn't have das to bring his korban. His father is bringing a korban on his behalf. And how is that allowed? It must be that even in the absence of the das of the kohanim, since it's not a korban shel kapara, but rather a korban shel tara, therefore they could be makriv without das bailim. So Gemara asks, Akasha Rabbi Yochanan Meyatel Rabbi Yochanan, if the word Toras is always a ribui for katanim, is then what about the pasuk in Yoledes? It says Zos Toras HaYoledes. So let's say that the word Toras, according to you, Toras, according to you, Rabbi Yochanan, is a ribui for ben katan ben gdola. Now, if you're being consistent that Toras means even a katan, like we saw in the case of a Zav, then applying that yardstick and that Chlolei Adrush to a Yoledes, we're going to come to an amazing conclusion that Ketanavas Ledahi, that the Toras Yoledes applies even to a Ketana, meaning that she could have a child. Vatani Rav Bibi Kamed Rav Nachman Sholosh Noshim Shamshus B'mo. There are 3 women that are allowed to use contraception. In fact, Mishamshus B'mo means they're obligated to do so because the Tashmish Hamita might bring to conception, and if they conceive, their lives are in danger. And what are these 3 cases? Ketana, Muberes, and Meinika. In the case of Muberes, we're afraid that if she gets pregnant again, she won't be able to nurse the child. Well, actually, that's Meinika, I'm sorry. In the case of Muberes, what's going to happen is that if she conceives, then it's going to push the original zygote in such a way that it'll be destroyed. And the Ketana, Shevetis Aber V'Togo, she may become pregnant and she'll die. So you see that a Ketana will, although she can conceive, but she cannot give birth. And if she does so, she's not going to survive it. So she can never really be a mother. So it's impossible to say that the Ribui of Toras is coming to include a Yoledes Ketana because she wouldn't survive labor. And the word answers, Hahi, you know what we're going to do with the Pasuk Zos Toras HaYoledes? We're going to use the word Toras as a Ribui. For what? Bein Pikachas, Bein Shota. Even if the Yoledes, she can't be a Ketana, that we decided, but she could be a Shota, and she's not capable of Das. She can other maybe Karban al Ishto Shota can divrei Rabbi Yehuda Desanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer other maybe Karban Ashir al Ishto. Now what happens here is that in the case of Yoledes, by virtue of the Ksuba, her husband has the responsibility, this chayvus, to bring a karban. Now, with regard to Yoledes, we have what's called a karban olav yorev, and that would mean that if the Baal karban is an Ashir, then he's got to bring a kizbo, whatever he has to bring. But in the case of an ani, he just brings shnei torim of bnei yoda, he gets off cheap. And now, since the Baal is stepping into the shoes of his wife as far as the bringing of the karban Yoledes is concerned, therefore we're going to look at the financial status of the husband. Let's assume he's an Ashir. His wife is an ani because she is totally dependent on parnasa from her husband, but he himself is an Ashir, and therefore the nature of the karban Yoledes is going to be determined by the Baal. And that's because he's mechuyev to bring the karban on her behalf by virtue of the ksuba. So even though his wife is an aniyah, because she doesn't own any of her own nechasim, everything belongs to Baal, but nevertheless the Baal himself is mechuyev in the karban, and he is an ashir, therefore he has to bring a karban ashir. The kol karbanos shechayeves. And the Baal has to bring all karbanos. Let's say, for example, a chatos be asham if she's obligated. Shekach kosei law. This is what he writes in the Ksuva. Achrayis the isli alayich min kadmis dinon. I take upon myself as chayvus to carry and cover all your financial obligations and to bring all the karbanos that you have a chiv to bring, and even karbanos that she was obligated to bring before she entered into the marriage. So now we can say that the pasuk Zos Toras in the parsha of Yoledes is coming to be marbe on Isha Shota Sheyolda. And the Baal has to bring the karban on her behalf, even though she has no das. So he'll bring the karban without her das because the chiv is now incumbent upon him. And that's what we're going to derive, according to Rabbi Yochanan, from Zos Toras HaYoledes. I'm sorry, from the word Toras in the pasuk Zos Toras HaYoledes. It can't be referring to a Ketana, but rather to a Shota. Desanya, other maybe, this is the gears of the Ran, other maybe karban Asher al Ishto, the call Karbana Shichayeves. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Lefichach in Pacha, if he divorces his wife, Eino Chai Bachar Yuson, he's not obligated to bring these karbanos. Shekach Koseveslo, this is what's written in the what's called the Shovar when he pays up the Ksuba at the time of Gerushin. She writes to him on the receipt, having received the ksuba, achrayus the islif olayich min kadmis dina, any obligations that you had vis-a-vis my chiyuvim are no longer obligatory, and that includes even a chov of karbanos that the Baal was chayav to bring the carbon on behalf of his wife. Is those obligations are terminated? Those chayvus end with the gerushin, and it's written up in the shover when she receives her ksuba. So this leads us to Daf Lamed Vav, which in Mirz Hashem we will learn tomorrow. So let me take this opportunity to wish you a great day, and thank you so much.